Well, hello, beautiful people. Today I'm going to be chatting with you about everything that I read in May. It was a mixed reading month. And as per usual with my wrap-ups, we're going from least likely to recommend these books to you to most likely to recommend these books to you. So you have to wait till the very end to get my favorite book of the month. We're going to start out with some disappointing reads that I was kind of surprised by. I had pre-ordered End of Story by A.J. Finn, and I was so looking forward to reading this. It had been a hot second since he had published anything. The last one he published was The Woman in the Window. I had really liked that book, and then I dug into this and just really couldn't get on with it. This is a book, a thriller, about a woman who is pen pals with a very famous murder mystery author. He reaches out to her and says, I actually want to meet you. I am dying and I want you to tell the story of my life. And she goes, but slightly reluctantly, because his previous wife and his son both vanished one New Year's Eve, and they were never to be seen again, and many people believe that he had something to do with their disappearances. And so she is reluctant in the sense that maybe he did, and what if I am putting myself in danger? But she goes anyway, and she's trying to get information out of him. What I found really difficult about this book was how flowery it was. It was trying too hard, like over the top too hard. I don't know if this is like a second book problem. Sometimes authors have that where they write the first book, it is an enormous success, and then they sit down for the second, they're like, how am I going to make my second book just as good and as, you know, popular as the first book? And I don't know if that's what it was. It was not for me. It was definitely not for me. The next book that I read is One of Our Own by Lucinda Berry. I've heard such good things about Lucinda Berry, and this is the first time that I've read her. And I think my expectations were probably just a little too high because I was pretty disappointed. I listened to this on audio, and it is about a woman who works at an emergency services telephone line where people can call in with their mental health issues and they can help them and hopefully, you know, talk them down from any actions that might hurt them. So our main character is a single mom, and she gets a call one night from a woman, a girl, I should say. She's a teenage girl going to the high school that her own son goes to. And she has been assaulted, and she kind of wants to end her life. And so we have our main character trying to save her, and she actually gives her her own personal phone number to try to keep in touch and make sure she's okay. That's totally against the rules. You're not supposed to do that. And as she has more and more interactions with this girl, she starts to wonder if she knows a person that might have hurt this girl, because her son has friends. What if her son was involved? Yada, yada. I just felt like there was no layers to this book. I felt like I ended up kind of guessing a lot of this. There was nothing really to guess. There were no twists or anything. It's just a very sad story, but I was expecting more layers, and that it just never came. I will read more Lucinda Berry in the future. I'm going to try out a couple more of her stuff, but yeah, it was not what I was expecting. Next is probably one of the weirdest books that I've ever read, which is Big Swiss. This is like a BookTube and literary fiction darling, and I just did not get on with it. This follows a woman named Greta, and she is a transcriber. She lives in a small town, and she is tasked with taking the interviews that a sex therapist has with his patients, and she transcribes them. And she becomes very obsessed with a woman that she calls Big Swiss. She has an interesting accent, and she has gone through, Big Swiss has gone through a really horrendous ordeal. And Greta becomes quite obsessed with her and just happens to run into her at the dog park, and they actually become intertwined, and the two storylines interweave, and the characters just seem inseparable. There was a lot about this book that I found interesting. I found the characters interesting, and I cared about Big Swiss, and I felt kind of protective of Big Swiss. But I will say that I found it to be very pretentious. You know, when like people, okay, I'm being super judgmental. We're all friends here. You know, when people deliberately do very eccentric things, and they're doing that to be different, and they think that that makes them special. It's totally fine if you do that, but I just feel like, why are you doing that? Why can't you just be yourself? I felt that throughout this book. I felt like both Big Swiss and particularly Greta were like very pretentious and very odd, but in a like deliberate kind of way. It's certainly deliberate from Greta, and I found it extremely frustrating. So I will say I was annoyed the entire time that I was reading this book. It is really good writing though. So if you don't mind a little pretentiousness in your literary fiction, I would actually really recommend this book. Next is The Carrow Haunt by Darcy Coates. I was in the mood for a little ghosty book, and this follows a woman who leads tours, ghostly tours, through a particularly haunted house. This house is particularly haunted. The man who lived at this house for years and years and years used it to bring in people who were like traveling, and they would stay there for the night, and many of them went missing. And so she kind of walks people through the house and explains its history and where murders occurred and that kind of thing. Well, she is approached by a man who wants to really look into the haunting of this house. He wants to have people in who are spiritualists. He wants to have people in who use like scientific equipment to see if there are cold spots and that kind of thing. So they all go to this house, and they promptly get stuck there because of a terrible, terrible storm that comes through. I will say this was very atmospheric. Some of the rooms in this house were so interestingly described, and I felt like I was walking through the house with everyone. But I realized what I really like about Darcy Coates' writing when it comes to ghost stories is when there's like an isolated person, like one person dealing with ghostly stuff. I found there were too many characters in this book for me to feel scared, if that makes any sense. Like, there were scary things happening in this book, but I just never got really scared. It was more eerie than anything else. So it was fun, but not my favorite Darcy. I have a nonfiction book up next, and that is Welcome Home. This is a self-help book written from a woman who is actually a poet, and it is all about how we can often in our lives make our homes in other people, like try to make ourselves home in random people. It can be like someone that you're dating. It can be family members. This book is all about making your home within yourself so that you're not so easily shaken, and you're not looking to someone else for validation. I liked this book. I will say it felt a little bit young, and the only reason that it felt young is because the author is young, and she's dealing with like dating situations that I just feel as like a married person, like I could connect with it 100% from my past, but just in my present, I was like, oh, yeah, I've been there, but like, I feel like there weren't more examples other than these small, like, kind of dating examples. Not to say that she hasn't lived a big life. I'm feeling guilty saying this now, but it just wasn't quite what I was hoping for. I really loved the idea of building a home in yourself, and I definitely highlighted my way through this book, but I guess I was just hoping for a little bit more. And I think she's come up with something else fairly recently, and I'm curious to read that because she's gotten older, and I'm curious to find out what new wisdom she has to impart. The Drowning Woman is next. This is my first Robyn Harding book that I read, and I really, really enjoyed it. This follows a woman named Lee. She is homeless. She lives out of her car, and she decides to move her car closer to the suburbs near the ocean. And she does this for safety. Like, it is very difficult for her to find a safe place where she's not going to get mugged or attacked or what have you. And so she's finally found a spot that she knows she is safe in, and she hears something in the early morning hours. She's parked by the coast, and she hears crying and then a splash. And she realizes, I think someone just dove into the water and they don't seem happy about it. What happened? She goes into the water and finds a woman there, and she drags her to the shore, and the woman is angry with her because she had been trying to end her life. And she's not happy that she's saved. And she starts opening up to Lee about her life. She has been terribly abused by her husband, and she feels like there's no other choice but to end her life. And she asks for Lee's help to escape this man. Now, there's all sorts of twists and what is really going on in the situation that you uncover in this book. I will say, I do feel like it's a slightly bit of a forgettable book, at least for me, and a bit of a popcorn thriller. Very easy to read. I wanted to know what happened at the end. I didn't feel like there were a lot of layers, but it was really fun. So I would recommend it to you. Home is Where the Bodies Are is the first Jeneva Rose book that I had read. And there's been a lot of like new to me thriller authors that I've read this month. Interesting. That was not planned, but seems like a theme. And this is her latest book. And I will say the cover is incredible. And some of the editions of this book, like, it looks like a VHS tape, and it's like got a sleeve and everything. And like, I'm an 80s child, so it is very nostalgic for me. In any case, this follows 3 siblings who come together after their mother passes away from cancer. So we have Beth, who has always stayed in this hometown close to her mom and has taken care of her mom and was there for her through her dying days. We've got Nicole, who's the middle child, and she has been dealing with addiction. And then we've got Michael, who's the youngest child, but has like been the one who got away and like made a real success of himself. And they all come back together to grieve their mom and lay her to rest. And they are, you know, struggling with the death of their mom, but also struggling to be reunited. There's a lot of resentment and animosity and that kind of thing between them. They stumble upon old VHS tapes of them as kids, and they're like, this is great, like, let's watch a bunch of old home videos. And they put one in, and they realize that what they're watching is actually their parents both getting rid of the body of a young girl. And they're like, I remember when that girl went missing, and I had no idea that my parents were involved with it. And they start to like go down the rabbit hole of what really happened, who were their parents. I really liked the premise of it. I liked the characters and how they interacted. Like you really felt like they were siblings. But I will say it's very predictable. Like I guessed the end. I knew what was happening like right from the beginning, how it was going to end. But I didn't really mind that. Sometimes predictability is okay with me as long as I'm enjoying the story itself and I'm enjoying the characters as well. I think it's harder to write really good characters and their interactions with one another than like big twists and turns. So I personally enjoyed it. Next is The American Agent. This is the 15th book in the Maisie Dobbs series. I am getting close to not the end of the series because it's ongoing, but I'm inching my way close to present time, and I'll at some point have to wait for this author to come out with a new book. So anyway, I'm loving the series so much, as you know. And this follows Maisie taking on a new case. She meets an American journalist covering World War II. And this American journalist actually goes with Maisie and her best friend when they're in an ambulance taking care of people. They were both nurses in World War I, and they have decided to try to help out and do their part in World War II. So this woman comes along, interviews both Maisie and her best friend. Everything is great until the next day, that woman, that journalist, is found dead. She has been murdered. Why has she been murdered? Maisie needs to find out. Now, because this woman was American, and a person from the American government comes to help to look into this. And I really liked the interactions between the American agent and Maisie. There's a lot of stuff in here that's personal bits about Maisie and her life, which is what I like most about this whole series, is like finding out more about Maisie and her friends and her dad. And I'm just invested, 100% invested in all of them. So I would absolutely 1000% recommend this series. I've been listening to it on audio, and it's the same narrator for every single book. So, and she's great. So yeah. Next up is an incredibly hopeful nonfiction book called All About Love by Bell Hooks. This is the first, and I think a trilogy about love. I've got the next book on my Kobo, and this is really exploring the concept of love and how Bell Hooks believes that we've kind of avoided the topic of love aside from looking at romantic love. And she explores that here, but she also explores familial love and love of self and love of your country. And it was an incredibly hopeful book. And I highlighted so much of this book. And I think I'm going to make notes on this book later, because I can definitely feel quite down about what's going on in the world. Particularly what's happening in Gaza. I'm still writing to my MP and like several people in the government every day, hoping that something will happen and the world will be able to influence the Israeli government to stop this genocide. We'll see what happens. But as a result, I definitely feel down about it, going to therapy about it, all of that. And this kind of book makes me feel hopeful for the world. So I really enjoyed it and love Bell Hooks' writing. And I can't believe that I've not read her before. So very much enjoyed that. The last two books are thriller books that I thoroughly enjoyed. And they're very similar to one another in the best of ways. The first book is called Blood Sugar. Hadn't heard about it until I think I stumbled upon someone reviewing it on Book Talk. I think that's what happened. And this follows a woman who is a serial killer, like absolutely has killed several people. And she is being investigated by the police because they believe that she killed her husband. That's the only one she didn't kill. She's killed all sorts of other people, hasn't been really looked at by police. And now for some reason that her husband Jason has passed away, they think that's the one that she's done. And she's like, no, absolutely not. She's trying to protect herself and prove her innocence just on that one. Although she doesn't want anyone to know about all of the other deaths. What I loved about this book is how character driven it is. It's kind of funny at times. You really like the main character, Ruby, and she's got a lot of depth. She's not, you know, she's a serial killer, but she's got a lot of heart. And the people that she kills are for very particular reasons. And I just really liked her, and you're rooting for her the entire time. It also goes back in time and you explore those other deaths that she has caused and why she caused them. And you really see an incredible friendship carry out in her university days. I loved it so much. I don't know why I'd not heard about this book. I want to read more by Sascha Rothchild. I don't know if this was their first book or what. So I have some investigating to do, but I would so highly recommend this. This is kind of like a good for her kind of book. If it's possible to root for a serial killer, I found myself to be able to. The next book, very similar. This is The Kind Worth Saving. It's the second book in Peter Swanson's series. The first is The Kind Worth Killing. The second is The Kind Worth Saving. And the third, I cannot remember, even though it's on my shelves somewhere. I just got it. I really liked this. This follows an investigator, a private investigator. He has this woman come into his office and he's like, I feel like I know you. Her name is Joan. And she tells him that they knew each other. He was once upon a time her English teacher. So Joan wants to hire this investigator because she thinks that her husband is cheating on her, and she's pretty convinced of it and wants some proof. And so she's hired him on. Now, behind the scenes, you are looking at some really interesting characters, and you go back in time to Joan's past as well as the investigator's past, and you learn about her childhood and just the interesting character that she absolutely is. And I felt like it was so wonderfully layered and character driven. You are again cheering on people doing terrible things, but you just can't help yourself. I loved going back and forth in Joan's life, and the reason that this is probably my favorite out of the two, Blood Sugar and this one, is that there are even more layers that Peter Swanson is having to deal with. Even more characters, even more history in each character's lives that he is weaving together. And it's just really hard, but he does it masterfully. And I just adore Peter Swanson. He's probably like right up there with like my favorite authors of all time. So I would highly recommend that one, but definitely start with The Kind Worth Killing because you will be confused. You'll be confused if you don't. So those are all of the books that I read in May. What did you read in May? Did you read anything good? Did you read any new authors like I did? I don't know what happened to me, but I was just like obviously needing new people in my life, new authors. I would love to know, and I will talk with you very soon. Bye, guys.